NASCAR changed the front of the race car this summer, and barely anyone noticed. There was no big announcement, just a set of small struts bolted onto every splitter in the garage, starting at North Wilkesboro. Brad Keselowski watched the story get almost no coverage at all and decided to say something about it. This was a big deal. He was right, but not for the reason you think. Let's get into it. Because the way this thing surfaced is almost funnier than the change itself. It did not come from a NASCAR bulletin. It did not come from a tech inspection story out of the Charlotte R&D Center. It came from a podcast. On the July 28th episode of Kevin Harvick's Happy Hour, co-host Mamba Smith was talking about Team Penske and Joey Logano, and he mentioned, almost in passing, that there had been a little adjustment with the nose of the car, and the splitter that Penske felt might help their downforce program. That was it. One sentence, buried in a conversation about Logano's momentum. And NASCAR fans, being the greatest amateur investigators in American sports, so they did what everybody does when something smells like a rules story. They asked Bob Pockrass, and Pockrass came back with the answer that turned a podcast throwaway line into a full-blown garage debate. Starting with North Wilkesboro, he explained on social media the teams had to add struts to the front of the splitter that should keep it from moving and deforming while at speed. Then he added the detail that lit the fuse. The flex had been discovered by Toyota. Sit with that for a second, because the implication is enormous. Toyota found something. NASCAR looked at it, and NASCAR's response was to hand every single team in the garage a set of struts and say, bolt these on. Effective immediately. No press release necessary. That is when Brad Keselowski jumped in. The RFK Racing co-owner and 2012 Cup champion replied to Pockrass, when a driver who also owns a team tells you the media undercovered a rules change, you should probably listen, because he sits on both sides of that table. He feels it in the car on Sunday, and he pays for it on Monday. So why does a piece of metal on the nose of the next-gen car matter this much? To understand it, you have to understand what the splitter is actually doing under there, because it is not what most fans assume. The stepped splitter on the next-gen car does not create downforce on its own. It is a traffic cop for air. When the car is at speed, some of that air stacks up against the front of the splitter and effectively stalls out. The next-gen platform moved the aerodynamic story from the body and the spoiler down to the underbody. Now imagine that splitter is not perfectly rigid. Imagine that at 180 miles an hour, under full aero load, the leading edge deflects a few millimeters closer to the racetrack than the tech sheet says it should. You have just changed how tightly the front of the car seals to the ground. You have just changed the gap that controls the entire underbody, and you have done it only when the car is on track, which means it looks perfectly legal sitting still in the inspection bay on Saturday morning. And the reason a few millimeters matters this much in 2026 comes down to how locked down this car really is. On the next-gen platform, most of the body and much of the suspension are single-sourced spec parts. When the window for finding speed is that narrow, the splitter stops being a small detail, so NASCAR required the struts. Every team, same part, no penalties, no points docked, no crew chief suspensions. Toyota's secret weapon had been confiscated. The rest of the field was about to catch up. North Wilkesboro, July 19th, the first Cup Series points race at that old North Carolina short track in 30 years, and Joey Logano put on an absolute clinic. The number 22 Team Penske Ford led 323 of 450 laps and beat Denny Hamlin by 0.8 of a second. Only 6 cars finished on the lead lap. It was Logano's 38th career win and his first since Texas in May of 2025, and it vaulted him back into the playoff conversation. Ford fans lost their minds. The struts worked. Case closed. Except look one row deeper into that finishing order. Behind Logano came Hamlin second, Chase Briscoe third, Ty Gibbs fourth. Bubba Wallace ran sixth. That is 4 Toyotas in the top 6, 1 week later at the Brickyard, it got even less convincing. Corey Heim, driving the number 67 Toyota for 2311 Racing as a part-time driver, held off Christopher Bell over a 34-lap green flag run to win the Brickyard 400 at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Heim led 58 of 160 laps, more than anyone in the field, making him the fastest driver to his first 2 victories since A.J. Foyt in 1965 and the youngest Brickyard winner since Jeff Gordon in 1994. A part-time Toyota driver won a crown jewel 2 races after NASCAR bolted struts to the splitter. Toyota finished 1st, 2nd, 4th, and 5th at Indianapolis. Ford did have a genuine uptick, putting Logano 3rd, Keselowski 6th, Josh Berry 7th, and Ryan Preece 8th, which is 4 cars inside the top 8 and 7 inside the top 15. But North Wilkesboro and Indianapolis are both historically strong Ford racetracks. Pockrass himself framed it honestly. Whether this was a significant advantage Toyota found is debatable in the garage. As of the Iowa race on August 9th, Toyota had 14 wins in 23 races across 5 different drivers. That is more than Chevrolet and Ford combined, Joe Gibbs Racing and 2311 Racing. The third Toyota team, Legacy Motor Club, does not receive the same level of support and information sharing, and it has not one same manufacturer, same struts, wildly different results. If the splitter was the secret, Chevrolet led the Cup Series in wins every single season of the next-gen car. Team Penske is the only Ford organization to reach victory lane at all this season, with wins for Hendrick Motorsports, Trackhouse Racing, and Spire Motorsports, and Spire alone has put 2 different drivers in victory lane. Keselowski laid out what he thinks the real answer is, and it has nothing to do with carbon fiber. And then he delivered the line that should be the headline of this entire story. There is a great argument to be made, Keselowski said, that Toyota is winning races in the boardroom. That is a driver from a rival Ford team publicly saying the competition out-organized his own manufacturer. Ford has a new car coming for 2027, and Keselowski believes it closes part of the aerodynamic gap. RFK has a long-term contract with Ford, they are committed, and they are in a lull nobody wants to be in. Keselowski exposed a secret splitter change that almost no outlet bothered to cover. Drop a comment and tell me whether you think Ford's 2027 car closes this gap, or whether Toyota's head start is already too big. I read every one of them, and I will see you at the next one.